Natasha Winters pressed her hand against the frosted window of the penthouse, watching snowflakes swirl in the December wind. Below, the city of Boston glimmered with holiday lights, but inside her chest, darkness was spreading. At 7 months pregnant with twins, her body ached constantly, and her doctor had warned her about the risks of preterm labor. But what hurt more than any physical pain was the emptiness beside her. Julian Cross, her husband of 3 years, stood across their sprawling living room, adjusting his bow tie in an antique mirror. His reflection showed a man who belonged in magazines. Sharp jawline, perfectly styled dark hair, eyes that once looked at her with genuine warmth. Now those eyes held only impatience. "I really think you should stay home tonight," Natasha said softly, turning from the window. Her hand instinctively moved to her swollen belly, where both babies were unusually active. "Something doesn't feel right." "The babies have been kicking differently all day." Julian sighed, the sound heavy with frustration. "Natasha, we've been over this. The New England Tech Summit only happens once a year. Victoria spent months organizing this event. Half the investors we need are flying in specifically for tonight." He grabbed his phone from the marble counter. "Besides, your doctor said you have at least 6 more weeks. You're probably just tired." Victoria Kane. The name landed like a stone in still water. Julian's new business partner was brilliant, ambitious, and beautiful in that effortless way that made Natasha feel invisible. She had joined Cross Industries 8 months ago, and since then, Julian's late nights had multiplied. Dinners turned into networking events. Weekend mornings disappeared into strategy sessions. And always, Victoria was there, her laugh echoing through phone calls, her name mentioned in every conversation. "Julian, please." Natasha's voice cracked. "I'm scared. Can't you just skip this one event? Or come home early?" He walked over and kissed her forehead, the gesture feeling more obligatory than loving. "I'll have my phone on. If anything happens, call me. But you're worrying over nothing, sweetheart. Women have babies every day." He picked up his keys. "I'll be back by midnight. Maybe 1 at the latest." The door closed behind him with a soft click that echoed through the penthouse. Natasha stood there, one hand still on her belly, the other clutching the back of a chair for support. Through the window, she watched Julian's black sedan pull away from the building, tail lights disappearing into the snowy night. 30 minutes later, the first real contraction hit. It wasn't the practice contractions her doctor had described, those gentle, tightening sensations that came and went. This was a vice grip around her entire abdomen, stealing her breath and buckling her knees. Natasha grabbed her phone with shaking hands and called Julian. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Julian, it's happening. I'm having contractions. They're strong. Please call me back." She tried to keep the panic from her voice. Another contraction came, stronger than the first. Natasha checked the time on her phone. Only 7 minutes between them. Too close. Too soon. She called Julian again. Voicemail. She sent 3 text messages in rapid succession. "Emergency. Baby's coming. Need you now." The silence from his end was deafening. Fighting through the pain, Natasha grabbed her hospital bag, the one she'd packed 2 weeks ago despite Julian calling her paranoid. She pulled on her winter coat, barely able to zip it over her belly. Her hands fumbled with her phone as she called for a car service, unable to trust herself to drive. "Harborview Medical Center," she told the driver when he arrived. "Please hurry." The driver, an older man named Frank, took one look at her face in the rearview mirror and nodded grimly. "Hold on, miss. We'll get you there safe." Natasha tried Julian's phone 6 more times during the 15-minute drive. Each call went to voicemail. Each text remained unread. Through her pain and fear, a new emotion was crystallizing. Betrayal so sharp it cut deeper than any contraction. At the New England Tech Summit, Julian stood on a balcony overlooking the grand ballroom. Victoria appeared beside him, stunning in a silver evening gown holding 2 champagne flutes. "To new partnerships," she said, her smile dazzling under the chandelier light. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Julian glanced at the screen, Natasha's name with a string of messages. He silenced it, telling himself he'd call her back during a break. The investors were watching. This deal could change everything for Cross Industries. He took the champagne glass from Victoria and turned his back on his phone. At Harborview Medical Center, Natasha stumbled through the emergency entrance as another contraction doubled her over. A nurse rushed forward with a wheelchair. "How far along are you?" the nurse asked urgently. 7 months, Natasha gasped. "Twins. Contractions are 5 minutes apart. We need to get you to labor and delivery immediately," the nurse said, already wheeling her toward the elevators. As they rushed down the bright hospital corridor, Natasha clutched her phone like a lifeline, watching the screen for any sign that her husband cared enough to respond. But the screen remained dark and silent, just like the promises Julian had broken. The automatic doors to the maternity ward swung open, and Natasha Winters crossed the threshold into the most terrifying night of her life, completely and utterly alone. The delivery room was cold and sterile, filled with the steady beep of monitors and the hushed efficiency of medical staff. Natasha lay on the hospital bed, her body trembling from both fear and the intensity of contractions that came relentlessly now, every 3 minutes. A kind-faced nurse with graying hair and warm brown eyes stood beside her, holding her hand. "My name is Beth Harrison," the nurse said gently, wiping Natasha's forehead with a cool cloth. "I've been doing this for 23 years, sweetheart. You're in good hands. Now, is there anyone we can call for you? Family? Friends?" Natasha's throat tightened. "My husband. I've been trying to reach him. He's at some business event downtown." Even as she said it, shame burned through her. What kind of husband ignored his pregnant wife's emergency calls? Beth's expression flickered with something, sympathy or perhaps judgment, but she kept her voice professional. "Keep trying him, honey. In the meantime, let's focus on you and these babies." Dr. Marcus Reed, the on-call obstetrician, entered the room reviewing her chart. His face was serious. "Mrs. Cross, your twins are in distress. We're seeing signs that they need to come out soon. At 31 weeks, they'll need NICU care, but they have excellent survival odds. We're going to do everything we can for you and your babies. 31 weeks, 9 weeks too early." Natasha's mind reeled with worst-case scenarios. Incubators, breathing tubes, complications she'd read about in pregnancy forums during sleepless nights. She reached for her phone again, her fingers slippery with sweat, and dialed Julian one more time. This time, someone answered. "Hello?" It was a woman's voice, Victoria Kane's voice. Music and laughter echoed in the background. "Where's Julian?" Natasha managed through gritted teeth as another contraction peaked. "Oh, Natasha! He's just giving his speech. This is such an important night. I'm in labor!" Natasha screamed, all composure shattering. "Tell him his wife is having his babies right now alone because he couldn't be bothered to answer his phone." There was a pause, then muffled sounds as if Victoria had covered the phone. Natasha heard fragments. "His wife, hospital, labor." Then Julian's voice, distant and slurred. "Tell her I'll call her back in an hour." "This speech is crucial." The line went dead. Natasha stared at her phone in disbelief. Beside her, Nurse Beth had heard everything. The older woman's jaw tightened, but she squeezed Natasha's hand harder. "Then we'll do this without him," Beth said firmly. "You're stronger than you know, and I'm not going anywhere." The next 4 hours blurred into a nightmare of pain, fear, and heartbreak. Dr. Reed worked calmly, monitoring both babies' heartbeats. At one point, the alarms on the monitors started wailing. Baby A's heart rate was dropping. The room exploded with activity. More doctors rushed in. "Someone mentioned an emergency cesarean section." "No, wait," Dr. Reed said, his hands steady. "She's almost there. Mrs. Cross, I need you to push now." "Your daughter needs to come out now, daughter." Natasha hadn't known the genders. She'd wanted it to be a surprise she'd share with Julian. Now, learning she was about to meet her daughter without her husband felt like another layer of loss. With Beth coaching her through every breath, Natasha pushed with everything she had. At 11:47 p.m., a tiny, fragile cry filled the room. Emma, she decided instantly, was born weighing 3 pounds, 4 ounces. Natasha caught only a glimpse of her daughter's red, wrinkled face before the NICU team whisked her away to stabilize her. "One more, honey," Beth urged. "Your son is ready, too." 15 minutes later, at 12:02 a.m., Lucas arrived, slightly bigger at 3 pounds, 7 ounces, but just as early and vulnerable. His cry was weaker, more of a kitten's mew. Natasha's heart split in two as they took him away as well. "You did beautifully," Dr. Reed said, his voice warm with genuine admiration. "Both babies are fighters just like their mother." But as the adrenaline faded, Natasha was left in the quiet recovery room, her body empty and aching, her arms longing to hold her children, her phone still showing no messages from Julian. The clock on the wall read 12:45 a.m. He hadn't come. He hadn't even called back. At 8:30 the next morning, Julian Cross burst through the hospital room door, his tuxedo wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, reeking of champagne and cigars. His hair stuck up in odd angles, and yesterday's stubble shadowed his jaw. He looked like a man who'd slept 3 hours in a car. Natasha was sitting up in bed, staring at photos on her phone that a NICU nurse had sent. 2 impossibly tiny babies covered in wires and tubes. She looked up at Julian, and he visibly flinched at the expression on her face. "Natasha, he started. "Get out," she said quietly. "Please, let me explain. Victoria told me you called, but I thought—" "You thought what?" Her voice rose, months of suppressed anger finally erupting. "You thought your speech was more important than your children being born? You thought networking was more important than your wife going through premature labor alone?" Julian stepped closer, his hands raised in supplication. "I made a terrible mistake. I was drunk, I wasn't thinking clearly. Victoria said you sounded fine." "Victoria?" Natasha laughed bitterly. "You're actually going to blame her? You're the one who ignored 9 calls from your pregnant wife. You're the one who told her to tell me you'd call back in an hour while I was screaming in pain." His face went white. "She told you that?" "I heard you, Julian. I heard you in the background, more concerned about your precious speech than your family." Tears streamed down Natasha's face. "I have a daughter and a son, Emma and Lucas. They're in the NICU fighting for every breath because they came 9 weeks early. And where were you? Toasting champagne with Victoria Kane." Julian moved toward her, reaching for her hand. "Please let me see them. Let me meet our children." "I'm so sorry." Natasha jerked away from his touch. "No, you don't get to meet them yet. You don't get to walk in here 8 hours late and pretend you're a father. Those babies needed you last night, and you chose business over them." "That's not fair," Julian protested. "You can't keep me from my own children." "Fair?" Natasha's voice turned to ice. "You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that I almost died last night while you were drinking? Is it fair that our babies are hooked up to machines because stress from your affairs probably triggered early labor?" "Affairs?" "Natasha, I never—" She pulled out her phone and opened a news article. The headline read, "Tech mogul Julian Cross celebrates at summit while wife hospitalized." Below was a photo of Julian and Victoria on that balcony, standing so close their shoulders touched, both holding champagne glasses, both smiling. The timestamp read 11:43 p.m., 4 minutes before Emma was born. "This was posted 3 hours ago," Natasha said. "It already has 10,000 shares. Everyone knows you abandoned your family for her." Julian stared at the photo, all color draining from his face. "That photo, it's not what it looks like." "We were just talking business. I don't care what you were doing." Natasha's voice broke. "What matters is what you weren't doing. You weren't holding my hand. You weren't meeting your children. You weren't being my husband." A knock on the door interrupted them. Nurse Beth entered, took one look at the scene, and her expression hardened. "Mr. Cross, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice. This is a recovery floor, and Mrs. Cross needs rest." "I'm her husband," Julian said, his tone becoming defensive. "Then act like it," Beth replied coolly. "Your wife just went through a traumatic premature birth alone. She needs support, not stress." She turned to Natasha. "Honey, would you like me to call security?" Julian's expression shifted to shock. "Security? Natasha, you can't be serious." Natasha looked at the man she'd married, the man who'd promised to cherish her in sickness and health. She saw a stranger, someone who'd chosen his ego and ambition over the people who should matter most. "I need time," she whispered. "I can't look at you right now without seeing that photo, without hearing you tell Victoria to tell me you'd call back. I need you to leave." "Natasha, please," she begged, her voice cracking. "Just go." Julian stood there for a long moment, his hands clenched at his sides, his eyes glistening with tears he refused to let fall. Finally, he nodded once and turned toward the door. He paused at the threshold. "I love you," he said hoarsely. "I love our children. I know I've destroyed your trust, but I'll spend every day trying to earn it back." Natasha didn't respond. She turned her face to the window where morning sunlight was breaking through the clouds. Julian walked out and the door clicked shut behind him. Beth sat on the edge of the bed and pulled Natasha into a gentle hug. The younger woman finally let herself break down completely, sobbing into the nurse's shoulder, for her babies fighting for life in the NICU, for her marriage that lay in ruins, for the future she'd imagined that had crumbled in a single night. Outside in the hospital corridor, Julian leaned against the wall, his eyes closed. As reporters crowded the entrance below, hungry for the story of the tech mogul who'd abandoned his wife in her darkest hour, his phone buzzed with texts from his PR team, from Victoria asking if he was okay, from business partners concerned about the scandal. He silenced them all. For the first time in months, Julian Cross realized he'd lost sight of what truly mattered, and he had no idea if he'd ever be able to find his way back. 3 days later, Natasha was finally discharged from Harborview Medical Center, but she couldn't bring herself to leave. Her babies remained in the NICU, their tiny bodies fighting battles no newborn should have to face. Emma struggled with breathing, her underdeveloped lungs requiring oxygen support. Lucas had developed jaundice, his fragile body glowing under the blue phototherapy lights. Watching them through the Isolet windows broke. Natasha's heart 1,000 times each day. She'd taken up residence in the hospital's family room, a small space with uncomfortable couches and a coffee maker that produced something resembling burnt water. Her sister Monica had arrived from Chicago the morning after the birth, taking one look at Natasha's hollow eyes and immediately taking charge. "You're going to eat this sandwich," Monica said firmly, pressing food into Natasha's hands. "Then you're going to shower in the family bathroom. I'll sit with the twins. They need their mother strong, not running on empty." Monica was everything Natasha wasn't: bold, outspoken, fiercely protective. They'd been estranged for 2 years after Monica had called Julian a narcissist in an expensive suit at the wedding. Natasha had been furious then, defending her new husband. Now, she couldn't meet her sister's eyes without feeling the weight of those unspoken words. "I told you so," but Monica never said them. She simply showed up, held Natasha when she cried, and ran interference when Julian appeared. And Julian appeared constantly. He came every morning at 6 a.m. before Natasha usually arrived. He'd stand outside the NICU, staring through the window at Emma and Lucas, his hand pressed against the glass. The nurses reported that he'd memorized their feeding schedules, their vital signs, every detail of their medical charts. He brought flowers that Natasha refused to accept. He sent texts that went unanswered. He hired the best neonatal specialists in Boston to consult on the twins' care, but Natasha wouldn't let him in. Not into the NICU. Not into her heart. Not yet. On the 5th day, Dr. Reed found Natasha in the family room, staring blankly at a pamphlet about premature infant development. "Mrs. Cross, may I speak with you?" She nodded, bracing herself for bad news. In the NICU, every conversation with a doctor carried the weight of possible disaster. "Your babies are doing better than expected," Dr. Reed began, and Natasha felt the breath she'd been holding release. "Emma's oxygen levels are improving. Lucas's jaundice is responding to treatment. They're fighters." He paused. "But I'm concerned about you." "I'm fine," Natasha said automatically. "You're not fine. You've barely slept. You're showing signs of postpartum depression, which is common with premature births and traumatic deliveries. And you're dealing with this alone when you have a husband who's desperate to help." Natasha's jaw tightened. "That husband chose to stay at a party while I nearly died. I know." I read the nurse's notes. "What he did was inexcusable." Dr. Reed sat down beside her. "But I've watched him these past few days. He arrives before dawn. He stays until security makes him leave. He sits in the parking lot all night in his car because he can't bear to be further away from his children. Whatever mistakes he made, he's trying to fix them." "Trying isn't enough," Natasha whispered. Maybe not, Dr. Reed agreed. But those babies need both their parents. And whether you want to admit it or not, you need support too. You can't do this alone. That evening, as Natasha sat beside Emma's isolette, gently stroking her daughter's impossibly small hand through the portal, Julian appeared in the NICU doorway. He'd lost weight. His expensive suit hung loose on his frame. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He looked broken. "Please," he said quietly, "just let me see them." 5 minutes. Natasha looked at her daughter, then at Lucas, sleeping in the next isolette. She thought about Dr. Reed's words. She thought about the long, lonely nights ahead, and she thought about what her children deserved. 2 parents, not one bitter, exhausted mother. 5 minutes, she said finally. "But you wash your hands first, thoroughly." Julian's face flooded with relief. He scrubbed his hands at the NICU sink for a full 2 minutes, then approached the isolettes as if entering a church. When he saw Emma and Lucas for the first time, really saw them, his composure shattered. "They're so small," he breathed, tears streaming down his face. "They're so perfect and so small." "Emma's 3 pounds 9 ounces now," Natasha said, her voice mechanical. "She's gained 5 ounces. Lucas is 3 pounds 12 ounces. He's stronger, but his jaundice was worse." Julian reached toward Emma's isolette, then stopped, looking at Natasha for permission. She nodded. He slipped his hand through the portal, and Emma's tiny fingers reflexively wrapped around his thumb. Julian made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "Hi, Emma," he whispered. "I'm your daddy. I'm so sorry I wasn't there when you were born. I'm so sorry." They stood there in silence for long minutes, the only sounds the beeping of monitors and the gentle whoosh of oxygen machines. Julian moved to Lucas's isolette next, placing his hand on his son's chest, feeling the rapid flutter of his heartbeat. "I fired Victoria," Julian said suddenly, not looking at Natasha. "The day after you gave birth, I terminated her contract. I also stepped down from the board of Cross Industries. My brother Daniel is taking over operations." Natasha stared at him. "You stepped down? From your own company? It was never supposed to be my whole life," Julian said, his voice rough. "My father built that company from nothing, and I thought I had to prove I was worthy of his legacy. I thought success meant more deals, bigger profits, constant expansion. I forgot what actually matters." He finally looked at her. "I forgot about us." "One dramatic gesture doesn't fix everything," Natasha said, but her voice had lost some of its edge. "I know. That's why I also started therapy, 3 times a week with Dr. Patricia Holmes. She specializes in workaholism and narcissistic behavior patterns." He laughed bitterly. "Turns out Monica was right about me at our wedding." Despite everything, Natasha felt a flicker of something. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the possibility of it. "I saw the security footage," Julian continued. "The hospital provided it to my lawyer for the divorce proceedings you're probably planning. It shows me looking at my phone in the ballroom. It shows Victoria talking to me. It shows me," his voice cracked, "it shows me silencing your calls and laughing at some joke an investor made while you were in labor." "There are divorce proceedings?" Natasha asked quietly. "I assumed. I've been meeting with lawyers to make sure you get everything. The penthouse, the house in Cape Cod, full custody of the twins, all of it. You deserve that after what I did." Natasha looked at Emma and Lucas, their tiny chests rising and falling with each precious breath. "I don't want your money, Julian. I never did. I just wanted a partner, someone who would show up when things got hard. Then let me show up now," Julian pleaded. "Not for you. I understand if you never forgive me. But for them, let me be their father. Let me prove I can change." Over the next 3 weeks, Julian kept his word. He showed up every single day. When Emma's oxygen levels dropped in the middle of the night, he was there, standing vigil beside Natasha. When Lucas needed a blood transfusion, Julian held Natasha's hand as they signed the consent forms together. He learned how to change diapers the size of his palm. He practiced kangaroo care, holding each twin against his bare chest so they could hear his heartbeat. He read to them from children's books, his voice soft and steady. Slowly, grudgingly, Natasha began to let him back in. Monica noticed the shift. "Are you sure about this?" she asked one evening as they watched Julian through the NICU window, gently rocking Lucas while reading Goodnight Moon. "People don't really change, Tasha." "Maybe not," Natasha admitted. "But he's trying. And the twins, they light up when they hear his voice. I can't take that away from them just because I'm still angry. Being angry is healthy. You should stay angry." "I am angry," Natasha said. "I'm furious. But I'm also exhausted and scared, and those babies need both of us. I'm not doing this for Julian. I'm doing it for Emma and Lucas." On the 28th day in the NICU, Dr. Reed delivered news that made Natasha cry for the first time from joy instead of grief. Emma and Lucas are ready to go home. Home. The word carried so much weight. Natasha had been avoiding thinking about it, about returning to the penthouse that held so many broken promises. But Julian had been thinking about it. "I moved out," he told her that evening. "I found an apartment 10 minutes from the penthouse. You and the twins can have the space to yourselves, but I'd like to come by every day if you'll let me, to help with feedings, to give you breaks, to be a father." Natasha studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or resentment. She found only tired sincerity. "Okay," she said finally. "But we're not married, Julian." "Not in any real sense. We're co-parents. That's all?" "That's more than I deserve," he replied. The first week home was chaos. Emma and Lucas had different feeding schedules. Emma struggled with reflux, spitting up after every meal. Lucas developed a terrible diaper rash that made him scream whenever he was changed. Natasha got 2 hours of sleep total, snatched in 15-minute increments. Julian showed up at 6 a.m. every morning and stayed until midnight. He took the night shift on weekends, learning to function on coffee and pure determination. When Emma spiked a fever on day 3, it was Julian who stayed calm, who called the pediatrician, who held Natasha while she panicked. "We're going to the emergency room," he said firmly. "I'll drive. You hold Emma. Monica, can you stay with Lucas?" At the hospital, as they waited for test results that thankfully showed just a minor virus, Julian held Emma against his chest, singing soft Spanish lullabies his grandmother had taught him. Natasha watched him, this man she'd married and barely knew, and felt something shift in her heart. Maybe people could change. Maybe trust could be rebuilt, brick by painful brick. 2 months after the twins came home, Natasha found Julian asleep on the nursery floor at 3 a.m. Lucas, sleeping on his chest, a bottle still clutched in his hand. She stood in the doorway, watching them breathe in unison, and realized she'd stopped counting his mistakes and started noticing his presence. He was there, every single day, not with grand gestures or expensive gifts, but with dirty diapers and midnight feedings and infinite patience for colicky babies. "Julian," she whispered, gently shaking his shoulder. "Wake up. You're going to hurt your back sleeping like that." He blinked awake, immediately checking to make sure Lucas was secure. "What time is it?" 3:15. "Come on, let's put him down." After Lucas was settled in his crib, they stood together in the darkened nursery, watching their children sleep. Emma's tiny snores mixed with Lucas's soft breathing sounds. They were healthy now, thriving. Their birth weight nearly doubled. "Thank you," Natasha said quietly, "for showing up, for staying, for proving me wrong about you." Julian turned to her, his eyes reflecting the glow of the nightlight. "I'm proving myself right about who I should have been all along. The man who deserves you." "You're not there yet," Natasha said honestly, "but you're getting closer." She took his hand for the first time since the birth, and Julian's breath caught. It was such a small gesture, but it held the weight of possibility, the chance that broken things could be mended. That betrayal didn't have to be the end of the story. 6 months later, on a warm June evening, the Cross family walked through Boston Common. Julian pushed the double stroller while Natasha carried a picnic basket. Emma and Lucas, now chubby and healthy, giggled at the ducks in the pond. "I've been thinking," Julian said as they spread out a blanket, "about renewing our vows. Not the big wedding we had before, something small. Just us and the twins and maybe Monica and a few close friends. A fresh start." Natasha watched Emma grab at a dandelion, her daughter's laugh like music. "I'm not ready for that," she said. "Maybe someday. But right now I'm happy with where we are, taking it day by day." Day by day is good, Julian agreed. He pulled out a small box from his pocket. But I wanted you to have this. I had your wedding ring reset. Same stones, different design, because we're not the same people who got married 3 years ago. Natasha opened the box. The ring was beautiful, simpler than before, more elegant, more her. She slipped it on slowly, feeling its weight. I love you, Julian said. I never stopped even when I was too stupid to show it. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt it again. Natasha looked at her family, her husband who'd learned to be a partner, her children who'd fought so hard to be here. The road had been brutal, marked by betrayal and pain and nights she'd thought she couldn't survive. But they'd walked it together, one stumbling step at a time. I love you too, she whispered. Not the man you were, but the man you're becoming. Emma squealed, reaching for her father. Lucas babbled something that sounded almost like Dada, and as the sun set over Boston, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, the Cross family sat together, imperfect, healing, and finally, truly whole. The storm had passed. What remained was the careful, tender work of rebuilding. And this time they were building something stronger than before. A family forged not in perfection, but in the messy, beautiful process of choosing each other again and again, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. The end.